This guy right here to my right, your left, is Tony Palmer. Tony Palmer comes all the way to us from across the pond at a place called Yorkshire, United Kingdom. It's the pronunciation, right? Okay. Yorkshire, got it. So Tony's been screen printing water-based ink for over 30 years. He's very smart. He might be the best water-based screen printer of all times. That's what Tom Cadute said. I don't think Tom's ever seen me print. But he could probably make a pretty close assumption. So that's great. That's great. All right, so what's your name? Tony Palmer is going to come up here and he's going to talk to us about that. But what he wants to talk to us about is the fact that this guy and that guy, why haven't you water-based printed? Good reason? Do you like being called out in front of all these people? Not really? What'd you say?
Shop hasn't made the transition from plastic to water-based, so I'm here to learn it. Maybe we can.
Because you're scared? Okay, these guys are scared of printing water-based ink. So Tony, why don't you take it away and show these guys it's not so scary. All right. Give it up for Tony.
Thank you. So really, what I'm going to do today is a little introduction as to what I do. I'm now a print consultant. I've been printing for 32 years, which is far too long. Started off in water-based printing because when I started in water-based printing, there was no plastisol. In the UK, we just hardly ever used it at all. So everything was water-based. We used to use white fabric and print the background of the fabric to try and make everything bright. And it was the norm. Plastisol was odd. As time went on, plastisol came in, we started to flash it, water-based started to disappear, and the reason for using water-based or plastisol became the background colour of the shirt. If we had a white shirt, we'd use water-based ink. If we had a dark shirt, we'd use plastisol ink. It's a little bit different now. Water-based started to disappear and stayed within the fashion industry, within the promo industry and the normal merch industry. It sort of slid away and disappeared. So what I like to try and do is remove some of the fear of using water-based inks. The preconceptions are it's going to dry and screen, it's really difficult to dry, I don't know what to use my emulsion, I don't know how to really cope with this new ink system. And yeah, those things are true. You know, I'm not going to lie and say that water-based is really, really easy. It can be challenging. But all you need to do really is just adapt a different technique. That's not impossible. So what we need to look at is, what do I need to change? Do I need to change my dryer? Possibly. Water-based ink, unlike plastisol, needs time to cure. Plastisol needs heat to cure. Needs to hit a certain temperature and it's cured. Water-based ink, you need to drive that water out of it to make sure it's cured and stuck to the garment. So you're going to have to look at, do you have the capacity to keep the garment in the dryer for upwards of 2 minutes? Some of the new water-based that are out now, they're really low cure temperatures, but it's still a long cure. So you've got to look at, is the equipment that I've got at the moment capable of printing the water-based ink? We've got to look at running a different ink kitchen. You know, we've got plastisol, we've got the Pantone matching system, everything's sorted, we're all organised, everything's in nice little rows and neat pots, mostly. And we've got to look at, you've got to buy another set of pigments, another set of bases. And most of the ink companies that are here today, they'll help you with that decision, but you've got to run almost 2 separate stores. So you've got to be ready for that. It's not impossible or scary, but you've got to be prepared from the outset to keep these 2 ink systems separate. They don't mix. Oil and water don't mix. So that's something you need to look at. Reinvesting a little bit of inventory and running a separate store. So we need to look at pigment bases. A lot of plastisol is ready to use. Straight out of the tub, we can just throw it straight in the press. With most water-based systems, obviously there are lots of different water-based systems, there's still ready-to-use ones, but the most economical ones and the ones with the most control are a base and a pigment. So we have a pigment that usually there's about 18, so we've got to look at those, and we use a panto matching system into a base. The majority of ink companies will give you a pigment system, and then that pigments will go into every base, so a discharge base, a water base, a normal, straightforward, soft feel fashion base. And it's usually the same pigments that go in. So you need to look at how you're going to manage that. Are you going to have to set somebody on to do this, to employ somebody to physically mix this ink? It's not really difficult to mix. You're already mixing ink. So it's not the end of the world. But keeping them separate and managing your inventory is going to be really important. The work practice. I go into a lot of shops. Part of what I do, I go into shops and try and help them make life easier. And I see the ink kitchen. And usually it's the one part of the shop that everybody steers me around. So don't look in there. Don't look in there. That's disgusting. Don't look in there. With water-based ink, you're going to have to keep the lids on. You're going to have to make sure that you know when things were mixed. And just be a little bit more on top of it. Again, it's not the end of the world, it's not difficult, but it's just something you've got to bear in mind. Keeping plastisol and water-based separate is really, really easy. It's just a labelling system. I just touched on the few different sort of bases that we have. And some of you are maybe confused by the terminology. A lot of you have been printing for a while and not. But we've got discharge. Discharge came around sort of like late 80s with the onset of rotary printing. Rotary printing was soft furnishings. These big, huge machines used to churn out meters and meters and meters of fabric, and they'd go through a big steaming process, and that's where all the activation happened with these activated inks and reactive dyes. Putting that into an ink, a paste that you can put through a mesh, had problems, still has issues. We've got to look at the fabric. Every time we print a t-shirt, the only thing that changes is the substrate, the t-shirt. It's a different t-shirt every time. And to get conformity of colour, we've got to make sure that the garment we're using is the same all the way through. But I'll be completely honest with you, in my opinion, you should tell the customer that the garment you're printing on can change. And so the colour can change from the first print to the last print. You're going to do everything you possibly can to try and control the ink. But what you can't control is the garment. If you're going to go from one manufacturer to another manufacturer, you're going to get a shade difference. It's not the end of the world, but if you tell your customer this right at the beginning, it does solve a lot of problems. Because what discharge does, it replaces the original dye with the dye that you've put on. So the strength of the base colour purely depends on the fabric. One of the major downsides of discharge at the moment is it only works on organic fabrics. So the polyester, the tri-blends, the performance wear that's really, really popular at the minute, it's going to struggle with. Doesn't like to sit on it, doesn't work well with the dyes. I do know some customers who use it as a base to try and kill some of the polyester dye, and it works a little bit for them, but if you ask any of the technicians around here, it's not supposed to work. But it does a little. So discharge is a fantastic way of getting a lovely soft feel. But what's happened recently is people have realised that they don't want to mix all the discharge colours. What they want to do is put a discharge base down and then plastisol on top. The main reason? It's easier. It's easier to clean up and it's easier to keep control of. Do I agree with it? Yeah, not really. If you're going to use discharge, activate all the colours and get a really soft feel. Otherwise, you've still got plastisol in there. And you need to tell your customer that there's plastisol in there. Because if he thinks it's a discharge print, you're in trouble. So when we're using discharge, we've got the same sort of thing. We've got an ink management. The ink management means that when we activate this ink, we put a powder in it to activate it, we start the clock ticking. We've got around about 4, maybe 6 hours, depending on the temperature, humidity, and everything else. So we've got to manage how much we activate, because at the end of the shift, we're going to throw it away. Well, there is a little tip that if you go into most ink kitchens that run discharge, you'll find a little beer fridge in there. To my disappointment, it's not full of beer. It's got yesterday's ink in it. Overnight, you can probably get another couple of hours worth out of that ink if you keep the temperature low and sealed in a fridge. The ink companies don't like you knowing that. So it's management. It's all about managing that ink that you've got and making sure that at 4 o'clock, when you've got 30 minutes to go, that you're not going to activate a whole gallon of ink because you're going to throw it away. Again, it's difficult or different to manage than plastisol, but it's not impossible. So that's one kind of water-based ink. And a good introduction to water-based ink is putting that discharge base down and putting plastisol on top and working out what it does with it. The straightforward water-based inks, the old-fashioned water-based inks that I'm used to, really only work on white garments. They have no opacity. Like plastisol is thick and it's strong and it has opacity. The water-based inks have no opacity. They're completely see-through, so they only really work on white and pastel colours. The need for those sort of inks is quite now niche. It's quite fashion-based, usually cut panels, hardly ever the T-shirts and the promotional wear, because we can't control what the customer wants to print on. 9 times out of 10, the customer tells you he wants a white T-shirt, and when the actual job comes off, it's a black polo shirt. So we can't control it. So those sort of inks are in decline, let's say. So there's a new type of ink now called high solid acrylics. You've probably heard of it. I'm not an ink technician, so these are sort of like my findings of high solid acrylics. High solid acrylics are really the industry's answer to a water-based plastisol. Plastisol is opaque, it's easy to use, it goes on everything. I've already told you discharge is opaque, but it doesn't go on everything. So high solid acrylics is really the answer to the discharge problem of what can I put this on everything? And they are water-based. They have a small amount of acrylic in there, no PVCs, they're very environmentally friendly, but you have to ask yourself, why are you using these? What's the reason I want to use high solid acrylics? Do I want to use them to impress the customer, for environmental impact, for a softer feel? And once you decide where you want to go with this, then high solid acrylics, in my opinion, will be the way forward. They're still difficult to use, so we have to look at all the different aspects of printing that we already do, which is the emulsion. Is the emulsion going to stand up to this new water-based, quite aggressive, some of them, high solid acrylic ink? Mesh counts. We're going to have to change the mesh count system that we've all put in place, and we all love, your favourite mesh for putting a white flash white. You're going to have to look at that and go, hang on, I can go higher. But what happens when I go higher? I run the risk of it clogging or drying in. Now, the ink companies they've cottoned onto this, they know, and so the open times of these new inks are really, really good. And I'm not saying that because I sell ink, because I don't, but from using it, if we go back to early 90s, you had about 3 minutes, and if you stopped the machine for about 3 minutes, you were going to have to wash it out. And you're going to have to scrub and scrub and scrub, then you'd always scrub a little bit of emulsion off and you'd be back to square one. With the new high solid acrylics, I personally have left them over half an hour coated in the mesh, and they're lovely. They're fine, they print out. So it's a good thing. But again, they are more difficult to maintain. So we've got to look at our emulsion. If we're running plastisol and water-based, are we going to have an emulsion for one and an emulsion for the other? Or look around for emulsion that's going to do everything? One option to make sure that the emulsion doesn't degrade is to chemically harden it. Once we chemically harden it, we can't reclaim it. So all these things are things we've got to bear in mind when we're thinking about water-based ink. Do we want to reclaim the ink? Have we charged the customer for the screen anyway and we don't care? Can we just remesh it? Is there enough money in there? These are questions you have to ask yourself. A lot of the emulsions now that I've used, I've got 10,000 impressions out of one screen using high solid acrylic water-based, non-hardened, and then it just reclaims straight away. But you have to find your right emulsion. I don't sell emulsion either. So the main thing when looking for an emulsion is getting that strength that it's going to hold throughout the entire print run. It is different for plastisol to water-based, so do your research, have a look into it. They have quite a low curing temperature, these high solid acrylics. I recently went to a customer who was curing them at 250. Granted, it was a long dryer, they were in there for 4 minutes. But it was going on to polyester, which we all know shrinks, it migrates, it's horrible to print. But with this new ink system being a low cure, we don't have to mess around with dye migration blockers, we don't have to worry about migration, and it works really well. So there is a solution out there. But if you can't put your panel or your t-shirt in the dryer for 4 minutes, is it the right solution for you? We can add different additives to these inks. This can get confusing. So with plastisol, we either make it thinner or make it weaker. We either add reducer or soft hand base or finesse. And what that does is alter the main structure, but we're safe within the boundaries. With the water-based ink, we've got retarders, we've got thickeners, we've got fixers, we've got binders, and all these things can be really confusing. But if you pick the right water-based ink system from your supplier, what you'll find is you'll get loads and loads of information, and ready to use is usually best. If it comes out the tub, leave it like that. The retarder slows down the drying in process. If you're having trouble drying in, have a look at other issues first. Mesh count too high, press too hot, ink too thick, something like these things. The fixator and the binder are all chemical components that you can put into these inks, which will affect their drying capabilities. So we can make them dry faster at lower temperatures. But there's always a cost, there's always a downside. One of the fixators from one of the companies reduces the shelf life. Now, water-based ink, ready-to-use stuff hasn't got a shelf life. As long as you keep the lid on, it's fine. So you have to weigh up all these options first. The normal systems that we have in place, so most of the companies here will have a system. Here's a 6-colour job. It's got a white base. It's going on to tri-blend. What exactly do we do? So you've got your mesh counts that are your favourite for you. You have the blades that are favourite for you. You have the printing order and the flashes. Now, water-based has to be approached a little bit differently. Although wet on wet is possible, there are some limits to the upper number of colours you can print wet on wet. What that means is, it doesn't mean that you can't do it. It means you probably have to flash more often than you would like. And you have to be very careful with the progressive angles and blades that you use. Try not to rip those colours off as they go down. It can be scary, can water-based printing, but it can also be really, really, really rewarding. When you can tell your customer that you're not using PVCs, you're not using plastics, and what they get at the end of the day is a lovely, bright, soft print, then it's fantastic. Now, when I said to you before, you have to decide why. Why are you going to use water-based ink? Is it for the customer? Is it for you? Is it purely to advertise the fact that you're no longer using plastics? And once you make that decision, my advice is push it as much as possible. Tell everybody, tell the world that you're using water-based. It can be a little bit of an edge in your marketing in that, look, we use water-based all the time. We don't use plastics. We don't use nothing harmful, no PVCs. And it can be a positive thing. So my sort of advice for anybody that's thinking about water-based, stick it in a machine and do it. What's the worst thing that could happen? Yeah, you've got to give it a go, because it's, as we go forward, you've all seen the RSLs, the RSL Restricted Substance List. So the things that we can put on a shirt are getting less and less and less. People don't want harmful chemicals. And what we need to do is start embracing, as we go forward, what's the alternative? If you look at all the big major sportswear companies, they're not using plastisols. I go to places all over, and where you would think the difficult fabric, the very warm places in China where it's really, really hot and really humid all the time. And they have no problem with it. And they're producing millions of prints a month onto difficult fabric with difficult conditions. If they can do it, I'm sure we can. It's a lot easier than you think. Okay? That pretty much winds me up. Thank you for your time.
All right, guys. Hey, stay right there, Tony. Stay. Go back to your ex. Get back to your ex. All right, we're going to take...
The floor doesn't open, does it?
All right, we're going to take one question for Tony. One question. Someone raise your hand. It can be anything. What did you eat for breakfast? What do you know about, what do you like? What's your favorite city in the UK? Yeah, Tony, what's your favorite soccer team?
Oh, please. Probably one you've never heard of, Leeds United.
Oh, okay.
Never heard of it, have you? I live close to Manchester, so it's one of those.
Have you heard of the Spice Girls?
I personally know them.
No, you don't.
All of them, yeah.
Oh, that's great. All right, you're going to get one question from this guy right here.
Hi, Tony. God, it sounds like you've been in this industry about as long as me.
Yep.
I remember well before plastisols myself. And really, I think all you're describing here is it's just a new discipline.
It is.
In the beginning, when I was using water bases, we had awful things like chromates to go onto screens to harden it, and what were those 3X meshes that had multiple threads in them, and the chemicals to clean up. And of course, when plastisol came along, it just made everything a little smoother. But still, in some of my private printing, I still use water bases. I love water bases. It's just learning the discipline. And once you get disciplined with it, it just seems to happen. So it's not a question, it's just reinforcing what you're saying up there.
It is, yeah, thanks. It is a discipline. And one of the disciplines that everybody forgets is the cleanup. You know, it cleans up with water.
Yes.
But the beauty of plastisol is when that buzzer goes, when it's time to go home, the pub's open, everybody wants to leave. With plastisol, we just press stop and off we go. With water-based, we've got to build 15 minutes in. Because we've got to clip the screens out, we've got to take the squeegees out, over to the wash booth, give them a good rinse. Now, that's not a bad thing. That means you're not printing for another 15 minutes. But it's not horrendous as long as you plan it and put it into your day. And like you said, it's the discipline. Just that little extra discipline of not leaving a screen full of ink to just come in the next day and press start. It's not impossible, not really scary, just that extra discipline.
All right, so do screen printers in the UK drink beer too?
Sorry?
Screen printers in the UK drink beer too? I thought that was a US thing. Okay. We're so similar. I had no idea.
Yeah.
All right, guys, give a good round of applause for Tony. Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.